Say up to the my basa. No, no, over.
Jingle bell time, colliding in a one-horse sleigh. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring. Snowing and blowing the bushels of fun. Now the jingle hop has begun. Jingle bells, speed of the beat. Jingle around the clock. Mix and mingle and a jingling beat. That's the jingle bell. That's the jingle bell. That's the jingle bell rock. Outside, and all the stockings hung by the fireside, waiting for Santa to arrive. All the love was shown, 'cause everybody knows it's Christmas time, and all the kids will see the gifts under the tree. It's the best time of year for the family. It's a wonderful baby, yeah. It's that time of year. Christmas time is here. The best time of all. God sends you His love. Everything's okay. Merry Christmas, happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, happy holiday. It's time to scream and shout, scream and shout, and everybody's playing 'cause school's out. Celebrating the special time we share. Happiness the best time of you for the ceremony. Wonderful, wonderful feeling. Go to the ceiling. Yes, I feel that's how I feel. Christmas with you, yeah. Blessed from above. God said you is love. Everything's okay. Merry Christmas, happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas.
The spread of germs that can make you and others sick. Cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you cough or sneeze. If you don't have a tissue, use your elbow. Wash hands often, especially after coughing or sneezing into a tissue.
The best way to protect yourself from 2019 novel coronavirus is to avoid being exposed to the virus. Additionally, there are preventative actions that you can take to protect yourself and your family from the spread of respiratory viruses that can make you sick. These include stay home if you're sick, cover your cough, and wash your hands.
Each day to keep germs
The spread of germs that can make you and others sick.
Novel coronavirus is to avoid being exposed to the virus. Additionally, there are preventative actions that you can take to protect yourself and your family from the spread of respiratory viruses that can make you sick. These include stay home if you're sick, cover your cough, and wash your hands.
The spread of germs that can make you and others sick. Cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you cough or sneeze. If you don't have a tissue, use your elbow. Wash hands often, especially after coughing or sneezing into a tissue.
The best way to protect yourself from 2019 novel coronavirus is to avoid being exposed to the virus. Additionally, there are preventative actions that you can take to protect yourself and your family from the spread of respiratory viruses that can make you sick. These include stay home if you're sick, cover your cough, and wash your hands.
Talofa, olo e mai mo mai le tautua le ala talua le KVZKTV, Pango Pango, America, Samoa. You are watching KVZKTV Channel 2, Pango Pango, American Samoa.
Talofa American Samoa, welcome to another segment of COVID-19 Home Lessons. I'm Christian Salia. Hope you are ready for an exciting lesson today. It's on civil rights movements. But before we do dive into our lesson, we have a couple of things we want to go over. Take it away, Ms. Christian. So definitely you need a notebook, a pen or pencil, well, a scratch paper lying around. I'm sure that you're so busy at home doing all the stuff, anything that you are doing. Take notes. Please pay attention. And at the end of our presentation today, or the lesson, there is an email for you to send us your questions, for more elaboration or anything that you need to be clarified on. So let's start with our standard and benchmark. Standard 3, students cite evidence that cultures are dynamic and changes over time. Benchmark U.S. History 3.1. We are going to compare and contrast key events and impacts of the civil rights movement to those of a contemporary reform movement in the Pacific or Oceania. So we have 2 learning objectives for you today. Students will be able to, before we get to that, let me just again clarify what an objective is, yeah? Objective is basically a goal that by the end of the lesson, you, the student, will be able to meet. So I'm just going to give my possible evaluation that 100% of the students will be able to meet these goals. Hitch. First objective, identify what the civil rights movement is by using the 5 W's, 1H strategy, or what we like to call it, our EFA strategy. You'll learn about that as we move along. Second objective, we are going to compare and contrast the civil rights movement to other movements in the Pacific region by utilizing the Venn diagram. These will be the key terms for our lesson. Look out for these key terms. We will be going over the definition throughout our lesson. Nonviolent protest, civil rights movement, segregation, voter suppression, resistance, protest, Mau movement, and the Maori protest movement. Okay, before we go on our lesson, we have a little icebreaker for us to do right now, and it's very simple. Compare, contrast. Compare similarities to tusa. Okay, these are some of the questions that you might want to consider when you're looking for similarities. What are, or how are these things the same? Contrast, differences. How are these things different from each other? For instance, if you look at Eden and I, you would ask the question, what makes Eden different from Christian? Okay, if you go back to compare, what makes us the same? Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through with our icebreaker. Venn diagram. For those of you that know already, this is what a Venn diagram looks like. For those of you that do not, it's basically 2 circles that overlap each other to form 3 different sections. The middle section, that's where you put all the similarities, or maybe 2 sides. The outer section, that's where you put the differences. Okay? I accidentally pressed on that, it's okay. Okay? So this will be our activity. Just 1 minute off of your head, you're looking at an apple, and then you're looking at an orange. Okay? Now I want you to find the similarities and the differences between an apple and the orange. Let's just go right through it. Okay. Let's start with our differences. Of course, the color of the apple and the orange. One is red. An apple can also be green. And the orange is, of course, orange. The skin or the texture. The apple has a smooth skin to it. And then if you touch the outer layer of the orange, it's kind of rough, yeah? Another difference, apple, they grow in cool climates for the weather. Oranges in warm climates. Okay, in case you didn't know that, well, at least now you do. We're going to look at similarities. Of course, apple and orange, they are both fruits. Okay, we learned that from elementary. They are both juicy when you bite into each other. Okay, and they both grow on trees. The obvious similarity. Okay, now that's our little icebreaker. I want you to go ahead and quickly draw this Venn diagram down. You are going to need it when we get to our part 2 of our lesson, or objective number 2. Okay? It's really simple. Number 3, it doesn't have to stop there. If you have more, go ahead, add 4, 5, 6, and so forth. Okay? Now we turn the time over to objective number 1 with Ms. Eden.
Thank you, Ms. Christian, for that wonderful overview of our standards and benchmarks. Now, moving on to our learning objective. Learning objective number 1, identify what the civil rights movement was about. Again, identify what the civil rights movement was about. Now, before we jump straight into a lesson, at Tafuna High School or in our classrooms, we like to come up with a teaching activity. So that way we want to keep you engaged, the students, with the teacher. So please, no sleeping during the lesson. Okay? So information finding activity, or the acronym IFA, we integrate the 5 W's and 1 H. So first W, what, who, where, when, why, and how. Now, what we tell our students is, come up with any question you may have in mind about what civil rights movement is. Any what questions, any who questions, any where questions, any when questions, any why questions, and any how. Okay? Now, if you look at the acronym IFA and you pronounce it IFA, I know everyone knows what IFA is, right? IFA means what? Okay, we don't really want to say gossip, because that's like a negative connotation, right? We want to say storytelling. Okay, now in order for you to tell a story, you have to have information. You have to have information about that story. Now, here are our IFA essential guiding questions, because we need to come up with questions in order for us to do the IFA, right? In order for us to talk and have a dialogue. Now, our first question we have come up with, remember, this is an informal research. So we give this to the students before they come in, and then we have our IFA session. Okay? Our first question is, what? What is the civil rights movement? Our second question, who were involved in the civil rights movement? Our third question, where did the civil rights movement take place? Our fourth question, when did the civil rights movement take place? Our fifth question, why is the civil rights movement important in American history? And our last question is our how. How is the civil rights movement relevant to modern day situations? Now remember, this is for homework. When you come back, you have to have the answers, you have to have the information in order for us to do the IFA, in order for us to tell the stories. Now, let's get into our IFA session. First question, what is the civil rights movement? Now, in order for us to understand what the civil rights movement is, we have to understand what the term civil rights and movement means. Our first, let's break it down. Civil. What do you feel civil means? Well, I know there are two meanings of civil. Civil can be in a courteous manner or a polite manner. And then there's another term for civil. Now that term is, can you guess? You can think of it as a civilian. When you hear the word civilian, civilian means citizens, citizens of a place. civil is. Rights. What do you feel rights mean? Rights. Can it be correct? It can be, or it can be something that is just. Right or just. So civil rights. Moving on to the term movement. Now when you hear the term movement, it doesn't really deal with you moving here, moving there, or taking steps. Movement basically means when a group of people come together that share a similar understanding or a similar idea that they want to advance or share. It can be any type of idea. It can be a political idea, it can be a social idea, it can be a religious idea. So that is what civil rights movement is. So when we hear the term civil rights movement, we want to say that it's a movement of a group of people or citizens that share the same idea, that want to share and advance that idea. So that is what civil rights movement is. Now, civil rights movement is a social movement in the United States initiated or started by the African Americans or colored people to fight against racial segregation and for civil rights. Segregation is also one, right, Ms. Christian? It's also one definition or one vocabulary term that we have. Segregation simply means to divide or to part from a whole. So segregate means to divide. Keep that in mind. And civil rights movement is also known as the peaceful movement. Okay? Peaceful movement means peaceful protest. There is no physical contact, right? So that is what peaceful movement is. Okay, our next question is, who were involved in the civil rights movements? Now, there are a lot of historical figures back then during the civil rights movement, but we are going to talk about some very known ones, right? So our first historical figure there is Martin Luther King Jr. We all know who Martin Luther King Jr. is. If you do not know, he was the one who came up with I Had a Dream speech. He is a civil rights leader and activist. He's an African American minister from Georgia. He preached the nonviolence and the tolerance movements. Most famous speech is I Had a Dream that I mentioned, and he also won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. So this is one of the historical figures that were very famous during the time of the civil rights movement. On to our next historical figure. This is a very known one, Rosa Parks. Who is Rosa Parks? Rosa Parks was an African American woman who refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white citizen. She also, she symbolized the rights of African Americans. She sparked a movement with the Freedom Riders and was also an inspiration to the Freedom Riders. Rosa Parks. And our last one is Little Rock 9. Little Rock 9 was the first black students who enrolled at an all-white and formerly all-white school in Little Rock, Arkansas in September 1957. Their attendance at the school was a test of the Brown versus Board of Education. If you do not know what Brown versus Board of Education is, this was a landmark case that stopped segregation in schools. Okay? And the Little Rock 9 were also awarded for the Congressional Medal in 1999 by President Clinton. So these are some of the famous historical figures that were present during the time of the Civil Rights Movement. Moving on to our next slide, our next question, our ISA question. Where did the Civil Rights Movement take place? Obviously, we know the Civil Rights Movement took place in the United States. But exactly where in the United States did it take place? As you can see here, as you can see, we labeled the states with 4 colors. You have the color yellow, purple, green, and let's say red. The yellow states are segregated by law states, meaning blacks or colored or African Americans have to be segregated from whites. We have the color purple. Purple states local option. So it's optional if you want to have any segregation laws within the states. And then we have segregation prohibited. Prohibited means not allowed. Segregation is not allowed. So we have the green states right here. And then the color red, we have no specific legislation, meaning there's no specific law. Okay? As you can see, the yellow takes mostly of the southeastern United States. Okay? Now I want you to keep this in mind because we will talk about this later on in our ESA session. Okay? So that is where the civil rights movement took place. Our next question. When did the civil rights movement take place? The civil rights movement took place in the late 1940s into the late 1960s. Now, we do not want to forget civil rights. The fight for civil rights has been an ongoing way before America became independent or won their independence from the British. Civil rights, the fight for civil rights began way back during the slave trade or slavery in 1619. So these are some important events that we need to understand leading up to the civil rights movement. Abolitionism. Abolitionism means a movement to abolish slavery, where we have the famous Harriet Tubman. Then we have the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and we also have the Emancipation Proclamation. And what is the Emancipation Proclamation? It was the American effort to try and abolish slavery. Then we have the establishment of the 14th Amendment, the Reconstruction era, Jim Crow laws, and then the Great Migration. So these are all prerequisite you should understand or you should know before coming up to our civil rights movement. Now, as you can see, this map right here, almost kind of similar to the previous map that I showed you. The purple states, this was a map during the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The purple states are the Confederate states, or the southern states. The northern states, or the blue states, are states, or the Union, also called the Union. As you can see, we have a map of the Civil War on the screen from 1861 to 1865. This map was quite similar to the map that I showed you before about the civil rights movement. Now, during the Civil War, the main issue during the Civil War was slavery. As you can see, the southern states, or the purple states, or the Confederates, were for slavery. The Union, or the blue states, were against slavery. So there is type of a similarity between these states and the states that were against the civil rights movement. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. So it's all about the issue of slavery, racism, and segregation. Now, I want you to keep in mind about some very important dates to remember during the civil rights movement. On July 26, 1948, that is when Harry Truman issued the executive order to end segregation in the armed services. Now, I know we mentioned that the civil rights movement was from the late 1940s into the late 1960s, and this is why. On May 17, 1954, this was kind of the start of the civil rights movement. Okay? The Brown versus Board of Education that stopped segregation in public schools. On September 9, 1957, Eisenhower signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957 into law to help protect voters' rights. When we're talking about voters' rights, vote means what? To elect. Your right as a citizen to elect who you want to be as president, or who you want to be as an elected official to guide you or to lead your state. On July 2, 1964, that is when Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, preventing employment discrimination. So whatever color you are, whatever race you are, as long as you are a citizen of the United States, as long as you were born in the United States, you have every right as anyone else. On August 6, 1965, President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act of 1965. On April 11, 1968, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act, providing equal housing opportunity regardless of race, religion, or national origin. Now, this date right here, we see that the civil rights movement kind of is dying down. Okay? So we want to think of this date as the ending date, but we still know that the civil rights movement is still an ongoing fight because of racial and racism and segregation. Our why question. Why is the civil rights movement important in American history? Why do you think the civil rights movement is important in American history? Here's why. The efforts of the civil rights activists and countless protesters of all races, meaning everyone that was from Martin Luther King to Rosa Parks to the Little Rock Nine, those are what you call activists. All their hard work, okay, went against segregation, black voter suppression. When we're talking about black voter suppression, what do you feel suppression means? What is the root word in suppression? To suppress, or to make small, or even to cancel or to crush. Okay? So black voter suppression is anything that will take away your rights as a citizen if you are black to vote. Discriminatory employment and housing practices. So these were the things that these activists fought against during the civil rights movements. And then we have our last one here, equal rights for the greater good. Greater good means equal rights for everyone living in the United States of America. Now our last question leads into our learning objective number 2, which is how is the civil rights movement relevant to modern day situation?
Thank you, Ms. Eden. That was a lot of information, but hold on to your seats. This is part 2. We're going into our objective number 2, which ties into the how question. Objective number 2, we are going to compare and contrast the civil rights movement to the other movements in the Pacific region. Ms. Eden, may you please erase this side of the board? Hallelujah. All right. So we have 2 movements that we are going to talk about and then compare one of them to the civil rights movement. The first one is, we're all Samoans here, and we all know a thing or two about this movement. It's called the Mau movement. Okay? The Mau movement, it was an attempt to resist New Zealand authority in Samoa, over Samoa. If you look at the history of Western Samoa, you had the big powerful countries at the time ruling over them. And in particular, one in particular is New Zealand, when they have their administration over, or authority over Samoa. So a group of prominent leaders at the time started to resist, want their country back, or want to take ownership or sovereignty over Samoa once again. We have some of the famous names such as Lawaki Ulu. This was the first wave of the movement. This was in 1908. He's a chief from Savaii. And then when he was exiled and then died, the second wave came into occurred in 1920, with Olaf Frederick Nelson. He was half Samoan, half Swedish. And of course, the famous Tupua Tamasese Lofi III in the late 1920s, and then much more other prominent leaders of this side. These were all people that came together, formed this movement. It was a non-violent movement, meaning it was a peaceful movement. The third bullet, Black Saturday, this is a very important event during the Mau movement. This is when a group of Samoans, led by Tupua Tamasese Lofi III, they went into the capital, Apia, to protest. It was a silent, it was a peaceful protest. But it turned out really bad when New Zealand police at the time shot into the crowd and wounded about 9 people. Immediately killed about 5 or 7 of them. One of those wounded was Tupua Tamasese. He died the day after, and then on his deathbed, he said the famous words that, if you really think about it, it's very true to this day. His words was, my blood has been spilled for Samoa, and I give it, and I'm proud to give it. And then he said, do not dream of avenging it, for I have built it for peace. And that's exactly what he said. This famous movement paved or carved the pathway to Samoa's independence. So there's that ripple effect into how Samoa gained their independence in 1962. Okay, the next movement we're going to talk about is the Maori protest movement in the 1970s. This was an attempt to reclaim rights, particularly over lands that were lost or stolen by the government. This dates back into 1840, during the time or the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. The Treaty of Waitangi, the problem or the issue with this treaty was there was a loss in translation between the English version into the Maori language or the native language of New Zealand. So over the years, the government was able to take lands from the New Zealand people or from the Maoris. And then it wasn't until the 1970s when the people of New Zealand or the Maori people decided to protest. They want their lands back because there has been mistakes over the translation of this treaty, and New Zealand did not honor their side of the deal or the agreement. So at the end, it led to millions in payouts to different Maori groups. So there was a good outcome for this movement. Now, does this look familiar from the beginning? Does it, guys? Okay. Your Venn diagram. Now we're getting into our activity. We are going to compare and contrast the civil rights movement and one of the movements that we just talked about, which is the Maori protest movement. Okay, I'm going to give you like a minute, like something that off of your head. You can go ahead and write it down on that piece of paper that I asked you to write this down on. Okay. All right. Let's go to our answer key. Now, if anything, there is no right or wrong answer. Okay, I just want to clarify that. Okay, the idea is for you to analyze the situation and compare the different things that you've learned and stuff like that, and then just come up what is common, what is similar, and what are the differences. And then you can input it into the Venn diagram, yeah? So I'm going to start with one, okay? Similarities between the two movements, of course, they both fought for rights in general, okay? However, the differences would be the civil rights was for the civil rights, but the Maori protest movement was for land rights, okay? So the common word there is right, but the differences is the other one is for civil rights, the other one is for land rights, okay? Move on to number 2, Ms. Eden.
Number 2, our similarities. They were both non-violent protests, meaning non-violent or peaceful movements. The differences, one was taking place in New Zealand, the other one took place in the United States of America, which is very simple differences and simple similarities.
Okay, and may I add to the nonviolent, even though the Maori protest was violent during the, the 1800s, the years preceding 1970s, but the actual movement in 1970s, it was non-violent, okay? So that's why we have that similarity there. For the different locations, the differences, yeah, these are some of the things that we often overlook, but it's really simple. It's there. These are the obvious differences that you can put into your Venn diagram, okay? Now the third one, of course, it's another obvious for the differences. One is African American, and the other one is based on Pacific Islander, which are the Maorians, okay? And then, of course, the similarity and obvious one, both of these movements have favorable outcomes, yeah? You have the civil rights movement. What was the outcome for the civil rights movement?
Segregation and racism.
Okay, and then the Maori movement, favorable outcome, they were able to pay out millions of dollars to different Maori groups, yeah? All right, that's that. But if if you have an answer that is not on here, go ahead. Add number 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Oh, then email it to us after. The more the merrier. Okay. Oh, just kidding. Okay, we have an extended assignment. This is a writing activity for you to do at home. Okay. We want you to locate a recent reform movement in the Pacific. Perfect example, Mauna Kea movement. Okay, that's happening in Hawaii right now. They're trying to fight for their land. What is it? Kukia in Mauna Kea. Yeah, that one. Okay, so that's an example. Yeah. So you take that one. You provide an evidence to support how your children's movement impacted today's society. Okay, and then write at least 2 paragraphs that you compare and contrast that movements that you've chosen, whether it be Mauna Kea movement or any other movements, the recent ones, and then compare it and contrast it to the ones we discussed in the lesson, yeah? Any questions? Back there? Got it.
And I want you to keep in mind that the extended assignment or the writing activity is similar to our question number 7 for our EFA session. Okay? How is it relevant within the Pacific or locally in American Samoa? So it can be a reform movement here locally in American Samoa or in the Pacific, whatever Pacific island you choose.
All right. I think that comes to our closing. These are our information, our emails, okay, all up in, okay. You have eden.brown@doe.as, christian.salea@doe.as. We're trying to utilize our DOE accounts from ASDOE. Okay, and then call us at this number, OCI number 6996516 for more information. I am Christian Salea.
I am Eden Brown.
And thank you for tuning in.
So perfect one.
Foi on tatou silfai ile nei tai au le alo famaleanga le leo le atua ia o pa ia ma whaingata ma usasa moa ele to e ola vai e se whamtalang ma wa o pa ia ma malu mai le hamatanga e ola vai le ngatanga o pa ia le popo ma upa le solo ia o le ale nunu watu i whailaunga lato te lufilufia ia le atulanga ale nei tai au wa abe i mātou masui o le mawhionga le komsina e me seo le sui komsina ma le malu le tanga luenga o le puipuinga o saunga le mulo tele ia mātou te whatalo whatua i le nei tai au le whamaleanga le o le tua no mātou mafuta nei ma le sunga le kapteni sunga ia ina Hubert ia o le sunga le ofisa ia tali ia malo ni tangata ia ono tūlanga la vai fia longo pui li ma fofotua fo ia wale anga i luma o lelei le ngata i lea o le saonga le mua si o tātou atunu whapito o ngawha lava ia te ilatou i lunga o sami nei tai au ia tui nātu i le sunga kapteni ia Hubert ia mo le whapula tili fo ia ma le amataina o tātou poklame nei tai au pe tātou iai ma le whalolap
Kai ako li lau ofisa talpau mo le ngai kai au pulang ole kako kai au e ala makali or kako pokalama ole au ku ma le ango le ngai fa moe moe inga ia mo fosila fia el mamalu or kako wa komo ia le kulanga ole makafai oi manga luenga fai ale Marine Patrol o le silea division ele pulpuinga le saunga le mula tele e a fia mai uma o kako moku ia i manua o au nuu ia ai meses kako mokungi atu tuila o le o kako ngofosila fia ma o kako iai fo i vai keimi o le o vai kauafa a hurricane season o ngā ele leile kako ngofosau ngiungi ia kupu angi se pefea ua lava saungi kako ia mo kako sa ai mese lava e o lo o iai o lako alia o lako va a o lo o e ka fao ma fai se ka fao mai le kulanga le kai fali o le au kuma le au ngai fa moi moi ia mo fosila fia ma i loa e oile e onga le vaa po le boat owners le au sam yunginga ai le yo mai a mai kau le anga ia o ke longari lau fiongari tadi Alex o le aso o ia i loa iai ma se fau kuanga i le malu o le lau fai va a o angi o la ko ngai o inga e kakau o nga ngofo sa ngiungi ai ai le o mai aso le anga o me fa ko ngai le va o me kakau o nga iai kongo le va ma sa ngiungi nga uma e kakau nga iai
ia haftai le ia no lo so kapteni ia nei tai au pe nana o mai le ofisa nei e tau fai fa pula fo i sau ninga fo i tātou ia whai tātou sā i keimi whapengei o na kaka ko i keimi o whā e mua lava o ngā kako o fo i nea wa ai kako waa po meo le leire meo lo iai a wala ngi i ei se wha le kongu ke me sauele wha e ngoa le ia mau ia kako sā pe a whapea fo i ene e noa i le sefe o ngā kako wola i ko so lunga kako waa ave se me se fei pe ave fo i mele i o tato ainga no mela i e ninga o fai ka ko ye fai ka ko wa i ken fa pingi ra sang yu ka ko i ken no fa
o le mai le ai fa ia ulanga o e o lo wai de ko fu mai a le au fai ba mo la ko trailer se ko so i dunga la ko sa e se soangi are kako paenga o se foi e se trailer e soangi mo le kula
ia fa mo le fa sidi la sunga kapten e ia dava soangi e fai ona avato en tanga lunga nei pe a fa apia e le se trailer avelo va me avelo va ai o fe la ke ma o avelo sa mo le sa ngane mo lo sa e mai la ro sami e ave foi de dunga lau ele e fe ia e so soani fem so soani toi nim tanga dunga foi tanga te mo la tu na mi so soani atato
ei a talpau e so soangi kulang mar kako makapule lo fakalkalong ngi kula mo la fai ba ka ko lo ngi bai kau o asolianga o sofa mo sa ngi Esau ko kuanga mo sa ki mai nga me se foi ska ko le moku ya manua tele. O ngau whaisi mau ka kōma mua ia. O lea se whaupuanga mo lau whaiwa ai. Manua e me se whai au ngu.
O le whaktai mo le papsiri le usunga hoi. Me kai au. O ke loa ka kōma maua i lo le me se whai ka kōma. Le mo mua lava ia o le o me kokingo ka kōma. Ka kō ke mangu fo i ai. A whapea ua ka kōru silfia le mamalo le tunu upo i la voro i elona sa e leo se whele me oro i elona sa. Ia, o le whautuanga lava ia e mana ia le toso i lunga. Toso i lunga e se whele le iai. E vai se me ono tu le iai ma vai kapuleni e ufi ai. O se awala pitsili nana whaingo fie. Pai a whapea fo lai paka ia lo sa i la lo le wafu. Ia o le whautuanga lava e taua o na asia ia so uma o maia o mea la e taulai wa e silfia. Ia o telo tato floating darklet e taulai nei wa. Ia o tele lava ina leanga maua tele na malepe se i tūlou ia le whafonga mai le tunu. Ia e tatau lava le po ono so na saua ia so uma e asilo na wa ama vai po mau maia, vai po malo le lei maia le, e vai po ye ni fende e ukafa e le le. Ia mau ki ngoa, mau ki ngoa o lai mau masiki o lelo na sa. E pe ona maari e fo i saunanga rusu. Ia o tātou lau i vai te mi o wha, ma savili ma lusi a misi o timu. Ia si na fautuanga bitsiri fo i. No ware tele lau fo i o te mi e pasi e tua ia sisinga i tuone marina. Ia o tele lau o sa pe wafa afa le vai fo i le pe walu le lua ko waso e le kāre liu. Pai le sina fautuanga fo i le mui la tō ro ia i o la tō sa. E ua tu tia ia ma tu ono ina le fai amo mai asi fo i le sa ma tā le liu ma. Ina nei te o to e sau le site. Ia ua moto pea na te le fo i le o le situlanga. E pe o le sina fautuanga mo la tō ro ia i o la tō sa.
Nei, ma lo whakai aku talpau. Ma ngai le akongo o lo ma ua o moe e lau whai waale kulanga o le sanga le mō ma le wha mō mua o lo o me kokingo, kulanga o lo wā. O lo o ia ilo ia e kau o ngā mawhosau ngiungi uma kākou o wai kau leanga. O ngai le o kalangoa kākou ma kulanga le kau. Ai o se whaupuanga ale vaenga miu pito mo lau whai wā o ma ia. Ngā wai ake oe le me wha mō mua pēr o mai ia kauleanga ma soa wha. O ke ronga i mea kako me kokingo le numa i au ngā fo i mō kulanga i mei o waa pēr wha pēr o mei o pambu wāri talpau. E kaunga ngā kofusia fo i waa ia, me sea waa ia le kukia i le marina. Pero sa nganga le ngā kakalangoi ngai le ka kia koe wheka ka sisinga ua afa wa a koe o le ngokoe. O le leo mai asi wa ma whaigi pambu whaila i e o komikianga sau fol liu pea.
E peo tūlanga nā ua o le bela wasai o le olanga le aru luma. Ia mo le whawhai ngufie ina ngā lua mnana tangata le o ngā ngā lakwa i uriki o la pam. E le peo aso la tau asu i whawhoma pai ua whaingo fie nei taimi voi le ale la kua e urunga ki pa wan mea ia watu le maamalo si e whaonga ia aru le akore e vai ia e peo le tūlanga na e tauna ia i uma ia waa ia nei e le ngata fo ia ngā ole taimi le pakalpa i lo whaonga ina ia mo le aru fo i whafo o e le taimi e le ua aru le vai i whafo si na aru le vai tono le ia ele ai se taimi o so ia tā le liu ma le ua i runga le pamu ola ia e peo tūlanga na le whamarusia fo tau ana iei pamu o tūlanga le i alia awa peo le alia lo sa e tau ana lua pamu le tu do fuwa le sairi o le waama i ma le pamu ia whengu fianga le ua aru le akorba iei whafu
o whera o kako me whenga runga ia talo pau le iei le pamu le ai le ale lau sila fia fo i e kako ako mu ule tūlanga
o le pamu e whaisi malosi e lua se lau kalone le pamu le alu
e pamule fafo
ya le pamule fa mai le pamule la I fafole vai e va beala le alu ka mare male ele ako ase mi nguke ia o mai fafole le wolo sa pa
kalwai o mai ese o mai a ko inga va o lo ia ia va o le au fai ba o le malu le kumu o isi pe o lo songo o alia ia ele kelengi me ko mo voia o ia e isi sa ia ka ko o lo kelele me ka wila le ko I va le wila o la se ro fa kwanga I va ia pe o mai kaimi o soleanga ma o la se sang ni o la fa va ko sa I mar ko la mai I la ko sa
ia ke lo vai o sa ngi ma va bea o se ia ma se ia se apo ia wa ya ma po ma o le awala nga se feu mai ia me ko mo le va wa le ia se wila sa u se me ala o le wila ia ma fu mai ma o le fo kuanga ala o le ave se ala le ma fa nga ve se ma ia ka wa se ia po ma o lo sa ia mau ki ngoi oi ia o le se
o skiu o ma me ka
wila ko mo
le fa kai tal pau Alex o le so songi kula ma ka ko o le ke tsaingi ka ko mi ke koi
ko so songi ko le officer ya talpa ele nga ka ave se le ma all over ai ave se fo le ka ko la au le pe ko si la mai o ka ko la au le fa ngangi ka ko va ai pe fa pe le se telefoni fa va
okay
e kala mo me pe o le ke me ko pos fa la lavi le nga ka la ave se lo ma e ma ave se ma la au o ma ke me sa o le fa le nga inga lo va
mai me ko
mai me ko ki ia mai fa si ka ke o la au ia o lo fa ka we ke ngi ia se so songa ku nga lo so kapten ia a popo ku fo ile so lo ofisa
mo le fa kai le si be ale wa o le wa wala kala ka ko le si se no le palo ya e ro au vai ka ngi wa o sa ngi uma ka ka o ile fo I ma kai ai ala ku o le palo o le asi dua fa kuanga mo ngi ya me uma ka ngolo fo le wanga ngau kele le ngau le palo ai e ngalo I me ka o fa ko ngai ia va angi o ngole o le pole fa I ngai o ngai e lo le au o angi me ka o me ko mo va angi ma fa ku ngai fo le mamalu le ko mo le au fa va inga ia mo fo sa ngai fo la ko la ngai o ke mi koma ke mi ngai o la sol palo e fenga ia fo ka ko le ula ngai sa mi pola ia o le se do fa kuanga I me uma la va e ka ngai inga ia fa kingo ngal wenga malo tu pecho ai yo aku foi fa kal ngolo foi ba o mala ku ke me angi fa pe mai a me e lo e ul me de al me ko fai mal me de ko fai o le se do fa kuanga mo le a fai ba o la ngolo wo ka ko le ka o fa lolo
fa kai mo le mo fa kai foi sidi sa le ia so le makai ai le ka ko sa bo e se o mo o ke le fo ia ka ko e nga ko ia o le palo e ngalo ia ka ko vule e iska ka e ko o la ile va le ile afi ia nga o ke me palo lo man ko o so le sa o le palo ia o solo lo va ai ngalo e le skala va pa o le menga ka wa nga fai mo ka wa nga le skala mo va o ko ia ka ko officer sia ki le po ko ia safety equipment I lungo pa po me se feiri so fu lungo ba o ma ko ama fai le o adu la lo o sa mi le a ku la lo
sa ko la kala ku sal pau o la foi le formula ka ko le fa ku mu ai le I alu se fango kanga po se ka fa nga fo I ku la nga o le sa
fai se fai nga fai va ia po ala vangi activity se fai le sami e tau la ona o le fatumbu le flow plan o le tau le flow plan le e tau mai le officer le au fai o tangata la I lunga le vaa po fea le mea na amata mai ei, po fea le mea ngai ai, po le ale tai mea toi sau i tonu, pe i se mea tupu ai e whaasotai, po mea umana mana, pa e tai mea tasi, e te taua na pai e tātou le toi siaki umai tātou ia safety equipment so le vaa lea, before e le alu i fafu. O le nei a ngaluanga mo o le puipuinga o le saunga le mu, o le purpose atoa na o le nei tau whai.
Nei, whakai. Alex, o le ase whapopo o e kulang o le palolo le ala ka kukala mo inga pea o le ngosanga le mu. Nanga e iri po ma mo le kausanga ren kia ke mo ka kole mo le pa. O le makua i ele sanga le mu le ngayo inga le nga whai kai mo le vale le. I ke lo va, o isi va. E ukwa e wale fungangi kaula a wale enka inga le pa. Awa whewheru wai. E ila makanga ko ngai lawo so la san wa au makar palu palu makwa ile sefe e se fa ko ngamo ka ngaka ngi o lo fa yare meria o le oso la lo ba ka le palolo a lo fe wa insi ba
Paftai mo le fafsi lo sunga kapten e lo le lava ta jo mal ta jo ngal e mo fa mo lava lo sanga le o e lava le e fai va e me se foi tanga to lunga o sal bone la ta ita to palolo fo tuanga mo ta to le o fe so ila lo fo ima masaya e lo life jacket e le ta to life jacket le ila na moli e mo lo na moli le e lo to e aveva e tanga to lo sami al fo tuanga la to ya mo lo saunga le mo au e te so la no malva tau fai e nofo pēnu ngal wha mo lo sanga le mu ona e tele wha alo whioa i le pōna ea mo le sosaina tu ngā lau sunga kapkeni
le o e ingi o i se pei o le se whakaikainga o le traffic o le awala o ingi kaku me whainga ruenga e kaku ke isu inga i le mamalu o le au whaiva ape whapea e le ukangia le e kula fongo ma le ako koala ko safety equipment. E iska ko
Whaftai mo le whafsiri lau sunga kapteni o tātou nei tual Marine Patrol e whamalusia tu la fono i lungo o wa o lo iei tātou inspection form fo i lea lo whaia mo tātou wa lo le stala ia e le ngata te me le stala ia e fua lava ia si singa a lea sifi ma lea sifi e a si e lo wa e pule lava le matanga luenga teimi e toe asi e lo wa e le whape whaatulanga ina ni atu a olo iei fo ia kako citation se whaina isu e sunga officer pe a whape le ato toa tato me ia e whaamalusio nungo tato sa
le tari e mwhainga e whamakalanga mai le senga o le citation le nunga le awala ma le manunga le sami e iso nga e pe kukusa o maale wha kingo inga le ngaruenga lea ma le kulanga ngā kunga i le court o e se senga whamurumuri.
Whaftai mo le whafsiri lau sunga kapteni o citations ia lunga le altele ma lunga o le sami e tau ese lai titi o ngā citations ia lunga le altele fui deo e o me mwhai ona tātou whautuaina tangata mo lato sanga le mūr whioa inga lunga le altele o le tūlea le whaamalusia tu la whono lunga sami e whaila sona e se senga ona o tausanga umai le stalau tātou wa a sia ia ato toa uma mea o le stemi e toe whaila si singa e toe siaki fo e tauan ato a whapela i lea o inala e tusi ia lau citation lea e fua nga i lesi e wasi singa o le vaa lava lea
Mahai, no ingala o lai o leo ilo le mamalu o le atunu o lo e iei fo ia citation le Marine Patrol kulanga nga kai whare o le e asi kako e asi ko sila fia i kulanga i waa ia e o e whaila ko ka whaonga e sami mai ngoi le pia o le sori kula fongo po
ia whaftai mo le whafsiri lau sunga kapteni o tatou waa ia lo o alu tafaoga ma taumafa le ava luga sam tono tulafono e sa e fa'asāina ona taumafa se ava i luga o se va'a i luga sam
o ia pe ala lu ngale wala
e sa'aleia
awale i pia pe auli ka vale me o malapa ya tal pa e sa fa popol kulang ore i ka ko va ia o roanga e kui fafo ka mafale ava e fa kulang ai ngale ngofo ka kai lu ngale va pe pule lava ka kai ko nga ngofo ngale e ngofo lu ngale le holo va e fa ka mai vai lalo o fo lu ngale fa le va e kala fe ngai la e me e fa ka nga pe sa
e mole e olo ia tatou tusi tulafono olo ia i lava ia tulafono i fatatau lava i luga o le sami e ese uma ia tuaiga solitiga tulafono ma saitesene isu ai o tulaga uma ia pe o le oga o le sami o le lea ko life jacket o le overload o mea uma nei e iai uma saitesene isu ai e o mea na e le ala ina whamalosia e tātou mo le si whamalmawa pe e whaida si singa lo wā nei ai toi pa ia e mātou tae au wal watu lo wā lai arui whafu e ma whai e tātou ofisa onga koe whai ala ngā si singa teimi e le pe o ta vale fu le le tasi e te pe alo e lo e vi e le ska e nga whea wai ale le kausanga mo le mea ngai leo si fia fu e taun si fia le mamalo leo whai wā amane tātou atunu
so se kai mia e ficau e mo ngona
pe siaki ang ngafi au ngi va ko ko lang va pero va e la kua ko siaki fo po ako because o le sina tu langa vo e te o tato e o malong siaki va o wala excuse nei e foi va e o masani fo ima fe me ia langa i te uanga o ia i ma to me ia a saure alu fa ngo ai ngalonga mai me fa e a be mo a mo o to langa an me o te na o isi tulanga i pai e la tulo e tai wole anga i de va to man tu wole o me la nga lo fa o pe tulanga na e fa ye ta to ma tulanga po i o citation ma e fa ma fo i ma fa ma ni no tulanga le e fa ya si ta uma ta mo o tau tikeria i so ta to no sa e fa ya si ta uma ta o le me na e fa ma lu sia i ta to vole ia ele ia le kala foi le masani le tunu ele ia lo se le va wa mo wole so
se le sami
misi lo ia ele si to e to so ni poi po tu la mana ia la iona fa mana tu pe ia malo pu e pe ale mamalo si ta to tu la mana ia ta tu na ia be
sangale mo ok loa e ile e foi fala la vele nga le sa kupu le loa fe male valu le alia le nga lu foi fa ka fe ai ka ma ko kolu le nga pe wo sa ngiu ma me o mal li nga ka ma nga ko e mo wa o se fa ka nga kele la nga ile kula nga le ka ku ka ngoi le sa male mo wa ama ku mo me ngi mo lu ngolo ba e ma fai o fa sa nga mai lo wola ma ole saule a tapa
ia wa per tulanga na le pe tatu tata noi pe on fai atu long pu li pe ma malo le tu no tulanga ia e wa o isi me tata ona lava ta pena ia tata ia la o i fafo ma le si foi tulanga le o le ta ua le o le mele o le flow plan o le flow plan e ta o mai le te mi e tata o tono le ba pe ala e misi te winga i mera ka me ata mera tu
o le ale me ka ko fai pe fa pe wa lo kusi me le flow plan ka mi ko o ko foi mai ai wole sauda le ba ke mi o le ale me ka ko fai le
ai ala yo
wole ka usi le wole follow ile me nga ka nga le te mi ka ko sa ko
wa pe tu langa na e te tau foi no tangi ala fai ba fa pe a lulu va a ta o te mi va pe ta uno to sa o el po le valu po ya mauti no ia to sa o le valu po po luma mai ya mauti no Ia o le songa le mua tu le tatou office e to siaki ma to e wa te lo te. Ia o le alu la vasi singa e to siaki uma va ani te me sa waima. A tu langa le sidi pole e wa la tu si fo te fodi na lole. A to no te lo te ia le vidi me tatou office. Ia ai vidi nga yo le to lo se vange le fa fonga le tunu ma. E vidi o le ainga ma. Ia e lo ia o le singa me fa so e tatou le telefoni le sa ui. Po sao nu mela le sa pesiri le to lua po me o sa to nu va to e vidi po lo apa ta tro information ia sa lu mo flow plan e per tu langa na ia mautino ia to sa va le to
le e o la se be piko sili o maka ua I lungo le pa o ke fong ele atali ele cover a ko le o sami cell phone eu foi o le VHF o le channel 16 o le sila me whainga runga e kakau ma o ngā iei uma I waa a lea sau lo Itali o lea foi se mea piko siri o ngā kāua I lungo lo sa pia whapea o le iso ke fongi o le ola foi o pele ma o lo waa e ise me po kingo po se me whainga runga e kakau o ngā sosongi mo e I lungo lo sa pe a fa pe o le lava se me e ko ku ye we
ya fa te mo le fa sini su ma kapten pe da a fa pe o le ai na tato telefoni e le tato masini la titi le ta o le e-burp o le e-burp le o lo I New Zealand fa pe Amerika o lo va ia mai ta mai masini ia lo tu fa mai ni mo tato ave va e fai si ta ia e fa malo sia ia taua ona ia I runga va ia le tato ta mai masini ia ona la te me pe I lo va mai a uma tato me fa ola ia le ia se el va ona o lo la e te mi un tol va ai la lo sa e te no fua au ta fol masini la e Why once pressurize ai al masini de I le sam o to mitia na alulo na signal alulo na satellite le lo lunga ia na lo la e po New Zealand po Amerika le lo va ia mai o tato masini la e
fa kai tadi ma ia le fa pulanga o le foi ia me whainga runga piko sili o ngā kāua e mawhai o ngā e koe wha amara mara ma kili I le mamalu o le atunu o le kūranga o le ao ngā kiri o ringi me kokingo. Ma o whea mawai o le alo ngā whainga o ngai e le skala le mea ngi pe po le menga la kua i whakau mai whao ngalo.
ia o le masini le nei e le skala la no le noa le tato vanga fo ile ta o noa vanga weather service po vanga le lo vai tau o le masini nei e te le stala ai o na le stala I fafo once le stala I fafo e le stala fo I malova le numero lo va le lo le stala ai nei
O ia avi uma information o lo va
sa le
ma le information o oe e o ngā le va.
ia
Okay.
o te me tu point fa blave pressurize le o tato masini dia ona la fola e signal lunga lui o na lo la ia e o tato main station si o lo va ia tato satellite le o va le lo fa le ton ona bala au mele tato office e po fea se me o lo ia le va o lo na mi so swat
Le o le ale umi e o le me whainga le e-purple lunga lo va. E whawhanga le maa pe sola le maa le
masini se lunga e kapele se lunga e kapele pushkai ma le vai ma le lunga ye le masini pato ape e mi al tembe o le tamale le situ lunga le famba mo le masini e telefata ia me se motoro va ai lolo o wa sidinga tali se u ia lo to mo foi mai me umane o le tio fiu wala au o flares ma me umane ia whangalo le tamara. Te re whara tari se I alu la lolo pa amoto ia mai mare moto ia hawa tu.
Ei.
E ta tau ona activate ka mare pa whai wao. Mo le ai a si mea te tau ona. E le ai la se station au tātou e au iei e activate lor me e masini da. E le ai se station au tātou po se senta e alu iei le signal kamara. E au mo le sa o ale musila o
Ko ia.
Ia whapso ka I mai loa le ofisana ia tātou tau sao mai a le location mo le e mo lai
E adu sa oi foi le
sao e
vai nga rescue le la mai.
sao la tātou me le o lai le wa tele na o isi tūlanga ia pe ona tutupo le taimi o tua nai fo ia o tele na tā alo le lunga me nunga mai le activate ia na o le tā alo e ta ua tūlanga le ta moana tūlanga o ba ma o le si tūlanga ia le stala ale me le lalo lo waba le va pela va tu va le me le va be
Le skala le molis. Ai ave le va olis fa nga. Le
skala o ba amoro mo
ya afka ya ku. Wa o ke ronga ngo mangingor kulanga ile ka ko iper. Ai ke ronga puko e fienga ka ko mingu ke e koe. Ai se ka ko fa ba pe ka ko ka ngai kulanga le ka ko ka ko ka ko ka pulinga I ka ya kulanga o le sama le mo ka ko ila fa ba inga ia awangi ko ingi fa la vela ve kupu mai ai me se fo ia au ai ka ko ai ngai au ma fa ki ngoi la ko kai renga ai o ke longa wa o uma ka ko kaimi a ko e sa fo se aso mo se kula ia ko e fa ki ngo ka ko ma ka upu man ka ko por kalama ka ua le ka ko marulama ai ke longa e failo leo ma sui o re ka ko paenga e molekulenga ngafafkai le malo le ofenga renga le TV ai me se foi le fa tonu onga ole ngia bango ka ua mako mo e fa so ko foi le kulanga ole ngaruenga awa foi le longo long puia di ole malo o ka ko I ngofo sa ngi mo aso leanga ma ai me se foi le vai ka o pololo inga ia sao mauli o ka ko fai unga ngi ka usanga ia mo foi se ai le o ke foi vai nga du pecho ai mori ke le ko lo fa ngi vai nga ia pale malu le le fiama komsina mai la ko uma lava ia ma ko ke ba ko le nga fa kai ni kai au iska ko ko mangu ia kele fu fa ngo koi ia fa ko fa
Talofa, olo e mai mo mai le tautua le ala talua le KVZKTV, Pango America Samoa. You are watching KVZKTV Channel 2, Pango American Samoa.
Lofa sa maiti, wa mai o tole nei tai au. Manuia fa fitai, ya tai au fo nei, la le amata tato wa onga, fa sa olo nofo, tu o lima lungo vai, a sa uni tato usu tato pese, fa ta lofa. We sa uni, hello, lapis. Say good morning, telephone to Ma. How do you do? Cosa Manolo, yo Manolo, I know that Manolo. Yes, I'm fine, thank you, Manolo, Manolo, Manolo.
I say good morning, Talofa, Suma. How do you do? Also, Manolo, Noi Manolo, I know my Manolo. Yes, I'm fine, thank you, Manolo, Manolo, Manolo.
Lei te le fioto le pese fatalo fai tato ne taiao. Le fia fo ya. Ma na ya mai tau leo ne taiao. Ya tamaiti fa sao nunga lau nofo fa alomo leo talinga. Ya ma e fa alomo lomo mai. Le tato le songa ne taiao. O ne taiao. Ya. E yai fo itanga sosoani le la tala no ai tato. Awa tato mta upu le vai aso nei. O tangata fesoa so. Ani fai fatasi. Tangata fesoa so ani. Le tele. Eva ai la tato. O le tangata fesoa ani le la tala no ai tato. O le fo mai nifo. Fai fatasi. Fo mai nifo. Lale mea fo mai nifo. Nifo. Lele. O le fo mai vai o nifo. Lele tele. O le fo mai nifo. Ya o ia lea. E ngā lue whapitoa lava. I le shaki ino tato nifo. Se lima ina tato nifo so titilo atu. O ka se mānaia. So anga tato e whaamama tato nifo. Ama aina fo e tau nifo whaia onga wapu. Yo no mo o le tenu wapu e nifo whaia onga. Ai tamaiti o le tā ua ia o na whaamama o nifo. Ia wa aila tato e lua lava me tā ua. E whaanga tato e fufulu ai tato nifo. O lo whaanga fo e fo mai. Fo mai nifo. E fufulu ai tato nifo. O aila le te i mate mai. O le o lo lima e sao. Koe kiki lava sao. Ai mai la tato lale melia. O le palasi. O le palasi e whaangai oe e fufulu ai o. Nifo le le. O le hali si mea e whaangai e fufulu e whaangai fulu ai o nifo. Ya, ma ai mai la tato. E ise mea whape tau fali. Ioi. O le toothpaste. Po le paste e whaangai oe. E whaapa i lunga le palasi. Ya, ona fufulu ai le la i o nifo. So anga tato e fufulu tato nifo. Ia mamale nei. Wa isi tato. So anga ia tato e ai lole. Ya, ona lianga ilo ia tato nifo. Ai ato anga oe e fufulu o nifo whaanga le palasi. Whaanga le paste. O kai ata mai oe. O ka semana yo nifo. Ya, o le asala nei. O le anga tonu lava na. O le fo mai nifo. E ofo i la tato e tamaiti. E mata pe va ai. I le fo mai nifo. Ai le i la tato e tamaiti. Ya. Te mana o lava. Se i whakaikai na fulu tato nifo. Ai tato le yo. E va ai le fo mai. Ne te ufai mai le fo mai. Po wa fulu tato nifo. Ai lai le fulua. Na fulua nifo ne taiao. Le lei. Le lei pe ato anga tato. E fufulu tato nifo. Ya. A mai lau palasi. A whapele ai sau palasi. A whapele ai sau palasi. Ya whai lau tina. Whaatau sau palasi fou. Avi ese le palasi na watuai. Ai whaatau mai sau palasi fou. Ole a fufulu ai tato nifo. Ya. Luisa Filemu. Malupe ia le asau ni tatou. E ufu le pese e fufulu ai tatou nifo. Whaapene sau ni tamaiti tau taumi. Ya. E whaapene na fulu o nifo fufulu la tutasia. Ya walile, ya tewa ai, ya sauni. Ifa apene tasi sang. Ifa apene na fulu omi fulu omi fulu omi. Ifa apene na fulu omi yaso malama. This is the way we brush our teeth, brush our teeth, brush our teeth. This is the way we brush our teeth every day. Related, mantua usul leila pesena. Pela le fufulu o nifo to anga fulu tato nifo. Awai ni mama e tato nifo. Te mawa tato fa mai. Awai mana tua fa tato. Olo big besi le fa mai. Ole corona virus. Fai fatasi corona virus. Yo fa mai na ro besi temine. To anga tato itu mama fufulu o lima. Foi fufulu mama mutu. Halu eta noma sesi. Ya cavalo mutu. Hofo la tato e va aile fo mai nifo. Fa ai fo tato e cava fo la to la ko la to mutu. Fe fa ai tato nifo atameti. Ya le tere pati mata eta maiti. Hip hey. Ya tu mata lunga ole o tato e mata ile fo mai fai nifo. Ya tamaiti mai tato le fo mai tato I lisi potulia o le potulia fata wai o na shaki tato nifo ya lera la o tato tonu o mai ya o le potulia tato dele yo la fainga benga ma le fo mai mana ya tamaiti ya o le fo mai le Papitua Monifo, Dr. Nori Takabala. Takabala ni kiwesteri ya Nori Takabala. Ya fumai na tato. Oh yeah, Papitua lava ili vainga pole shakino tato nifo. Ya famu no le fo tato. I say no atu fumai. Mana alfina bena.
Talofa American Samoa. My name is Dr. Noreen Takabala. I'm a dentist from LBJ, and I work alongside Dr. Christina Paula, the ECE dentist, and we provide dental services to the ECE children of American Samoa. So our dental services include dental screening and examination, preventive care such as cleaning, fluoride application, and oral dental health hygiene, which include educating children about good dental hygiene practices, promoting healthy food, and also we provide dental fillings and emergency treatments such as extraction and antibiotics, prescription of antibiotics for dental infection. However, currently with the situation of the COVID-19, we suspend all of our non-emergency dental services. In other words, we only provide emergency dental services such as extraction and prescription of antibiotics. So if you think your child has a dental emergency, please call 633-5177 so that we can schedule an appointment for the child. Thank you very much.
Yeah, tamaiti vai tato. Tato fo mai ke yo fasa mo. Ase yo tanu la fasa mo atu. O tato fo mai fai nifu. O le tele yo madbenga. E fa ngala to ina ia tau fai la to. So swani tato nifu o le nunga ko fa tata ina le fulu mo tato nifu. Afa pete nalo nifu. Una e sawe tomu I vai tato infoa Loenga le whaanga e fu mai, e whaanga, e whaanga nifo a tingalo nifo, so swani la to, atu le vai la au, ina ia te ai le tingalo nifo, a whapele hanga te lolo nifo, pero tau mwhaile la to, whai se tau mawhiti, ina ia awai ne i tingalo nifo, pero ia, maelo nifo, ia una avi ese la, ia pe whai ese le nifo, oi, a whapeo wa pulo nifo, pe wa leanga tono lo nifo, pena tau whaile la ino la to, i wha atulo nifo, ai, aga no e tele ana, whai o ina sauai, e wa aile tatou fu mai, e ai fo i vai la awa la to, wha ngai nifo, ina i fsosoani, ina ia awane e tina inga, ai ia tau whai, sefere nifo oi, i awane i wha ia, ia tau angala tatou, ta lasi tatou, nifo, mata mai tatou, ia, o me whainga ringa le wha ngai fo mai, ile susuani a oto, ile whainga oto, nifo. E halata me tina o mai mo oto potu lia. Ioi, tere ia taile ngata i fo mai, ai fo i una susuani. E ba tua tatou, le wha mai ulo i pisi nei, ia i tama whai tatou, fufuru ma tatou nifo, ina ia mama tatou lutu, ina ia awa ine i pisi le wha mai lea, o le hafo i mo wha mai. Corona vai, Lucy, ia tapaiti vai, ia o ngai tine lea,
Lucy following more Kathy.
ia o tine leo Kathy, o ia le e susuani a Dr. Noreen, ia sauna i si tama lea,
Malo.
ia o malo, ia o si ko i tama lea susuani fu mai,
Ia ramua ia Josiah mana.
ia ma le tama o Josiah manaya, ia o susuani uma ia as fu mai o Noreen, ina ia susuani a tatou, i le wha lea tonga fisinga o tatou, nifo. Ia, Dr. Noreen whatai lava, ia le atu numa tau. Ia, tō wha, Doctor. Ia, o mai la tatou o mai.
Tamaiti, e hala o matamata. E mana ia le pasa fo mai. Au le fo mai. To a tele yo fo mai ese lai tono il potu. So soani ese oe. Ile se akina o nifo. Ya le tamaiti. Ya va ai la tato. E ai le pese. Ele tato pese se e yuso fata si tato. Ina ia fa matala atiri ai. Le fufuluina po le fa maina o tato nifo. Ya nufo sao. Sa uni fa alongo lei. Pati ma tatou, mana ia tatou pese. Ia nofo lei oe, ma o le pese, na ia whamanatu e te oe le furunga o nifo. Ia ale temi nei, ia ole a whaifo e tatou upu a o. e le ai se tatou tusi le aso nei talu ai le na o tatou e mata i le fōmaʻi fainifo a ia malōlō la tatou tusi ia ale la o tatou e fai tatou upu aoaʻo
Ia na fosa'o manatua fo i tātou tamaiti. E tātau a o na iai tātou upu a o. Manatua e ese le sona, ese fo i tātou upu. Ia, ai mai la le upu lea. Tilo, ma ai mai lunga ole. Pepa po le lau, papa. Ia, le upu lea, fufulu. Na tau whaalongo se upu whaapeo whamatala i le sona al whaia onga. Sa tau whaalongo, le lei. O waila sisina te tau mai e tau le afo i le matai tusi. Mani va yaso tatu va aima whaalongo i matai tusi lea a. Uka le lei, maskani ma. Le lei tele, o le wha. Wha, a matai le upu fufulu. Whai whatasi, fufulu. Wha leo mai le wha ia. Fa'aleo fa'atasi. Lelei tele. Ia, o le apati fo i tatou sila pela. Ia, tu uli mai lunga vai no fosa'o va'ai mai le whaia. Onga. Fufulu. Lu. Tu e tasi. Lu. Fai fa'atasi. Lu. Ua maua. Ia, tu fai ia, lu. E fia sila pela le upu fufuru. E fia, fai tau. Tasi, lua, tolu. E fia sila pela. E le tele. Oka se tau popoto. E tolu sila pela. O le alma le fai numera leo. Leva ai metato. Fai numera tolu. Ia ba ai mai disi upu le tātou nifo. Sa auto whālongo se upu whāpea nei. Le lei tele. O le ale mata i tusi lea e a mata i le upu nifo. Leo tele mai ia. Le lei o le nu. Ia. O waila na te iloa. O le afo le leo o le mata i tusi lea nu. O ai. Leo tele Luisa, whaaleo mele no. Lelei whaaleo whatasi. Lelei no nifo, vai whatasi. Nifo. O le apati e tātou sila pela. Vaai ia, vaai whaiaonga, nifo. Te vaai, nifo. Vai whatasi. Nifo. Umaua. Ia. Fai tau, e fia sila pela lupu ni fo fai tau. Tasi lua. Tu e sau, tasi lua. Fia sila pela. E lei tele. E lua sila pela. E si foi le tatou upu tamaiti. Palasi. Ia ai mata i tusi le a mata le upu palasi, mata i tusi mua. Ai mata i tusi le. O le ale na mata i tusi. O le mata i tusi a mata le upu palasi. Pi, o ka se poto rupe fai mai pi. Ia se fa leo me le tatou pi, fa leo. Le fai fa tasi le upu palasi. Pi palasi. O le a pati sila pela le upu palasi. Va ai mai a te au. Palasi. Tu e tasi. Palasi. Fai fa tasi. Ia. Palasi. E fia. Ka se tau popoto fai tau. Tasi. Lua. Tolu. E fia sila pela le upu palasi. Tolu. O le ale fai numera. Tolu. Ia tamaiti. O tatou upu a o na le sona le nei yaso. Fa amasani. A o e oe maloutina malouta ma.
Ia tamaiti. O tatou upu a o na le nei yaso. Ai mana tua le oe. A fufulu o nifo whaanga le palasi male pe le tele mea tā ua e lua whaanga o teni uma e fufuru ai o nifo. Ia, ai tamaiti man tua foi le wha mai o le corona virusi. I tā ua foi a tātou wha mamau li mai taimi uma e te le ialu e ai e te le ialu e ta alo pe a umana e ta alo pa e alu foi whaanga le whale ese uman whaanga fufulu o lima. Taimi uma fufulu o lima ina ia pui pui ai tātou ma le wha mai ole whai whaatasi corona virusi. So whai whaatasi lelei tamaiti e ai foi la tātou pese mana tua foi le tātou pese rena usu ana nafi ia le rātou e whamanatu foi ina ia maua le tātou ia tutu ma ilunga tamaiti Samo e moe, savali, o pepeta o vai. Ia lelei, whaalolo lima, ngā yoyo vai, samo e moe, ia lelei, sauni o le ausu le tātou pese, pese le na usu anafi. Ia le la ato e whamanatu nei aso, ina ia maua le, oi, we sauni. Ia. Tātou pese nā, nofo le whale, usu whaatasi, maloti nāpo, lota maa, ia le taimi nei tamaiti, ia ole atu, ua whale o ngā tātou, tu ua le a o ngā tātou te